Hello, my name is KelseyBoyd, and this is going to be my discussion of the OCD assignment. Um, we watched that TED Talk on OCD, and one of the questions was if it confirmed or dispelled any of our knowledge of OCD. Um, Personally, I think that when it comes to knowledge about OCD, I had a fairly decent understanding. Although I do have to say that a lot of the assumptions about OCD that I had did kind of revolve around the whole cleaning aspect. And our textbook did mention that although that is one of the main issues that those that struggle with OCD face, is sometimes it is like more of a contamination based thing. The person that was doing the TED Talk mentioned that hers was more based around symmetry. So I thought that that was very interesting because although I did know that some people struggled with contamination and cleaning rituals, I didn't really know that symmetry was one of the main kind of things that people might also struggle with. I mean, I guess it kind of also reflects on cleaning just because if you want everything neat and orderly, that kind of goes with symmetry, but I didn't think of it as the extent that the person talked about how she had to have her body symmetrical and how it felt, and she had to touch things symmetrically. So I think that it kind of dispelled a little bit of that for me personally. Um, and things that I've learned about OCD from this video was actually quite a lot. Just like I mentioned before, I didn't really think of symmetry being one of the main compulsions. And I have to also say that I didn't think that people had more than one compulsion. So she mentioned that her body had to feel symmetrical, and that not only had to feel symmetrical, but that she wanted to touch things symmetrically. She thought that she could feel cracks in the sidewalk on her feet, and that she had multiple obsessions that kind of led to things interfering with her daily life. So I definitely learned that it's not only just one thing, even it could be a whole host of things that drive somebody to this kind of behavior. Um, I also thought it was interesting that the video focused on different stereotypes around OCD because I definitely see those around as well. She brought up media and how people like tag like their clean lockers, it's like hashtag I'm OCD and that kind of stuff. And it's really unfortunate that that's a thing just because I see that with a lot of things like people unfortunately, I hear people joke about suicide on social media. There were trends of calling things like, oh, that's so dumb, that's so gay on social media. So people tend to take a lot of terms that people identify with and kind of twist them into something that they can also kind of use for their own purposes. So I thought it was very interesting that she focused on that and that representation to her was a very important thing because I think for anybody it's really important to have whatever they're struggling with accurately represented. Um, I also felt like it was interesting to learn about how she viewed her OCD. She took a very positive aspect of it. She thought that her needing to be perfectionist in her schoolwork and her needing to feel symmetry has led her to have a balanced life. That she has her week organized, she's always been a good student, and everything like that, just because her OCD kind of forces her to do things that other people should do, like lead a balanced life and have time for exercise, leisure, work, and also be good at school. So I thought it was really interesting that she took such a positive like view on her disorder. And so I definitely learned that that's something that people that struggle with this kind of thing can do. Even though that's something as social workers we're supposed to encourage people to do, I just feel as though, as somebody who doesn't have OCD, it would be very difficult for me to tell somebody um, in the ways that being OCD has made their life more positive. So I feel as though when somebody is struggling with something, it's difficult to tell them, but hey, look, here are the good things that have come out of this because it's their whole lives. It's kind of like if somebody were to die, you don't want to tell them, oh, wow, they're in a better place now. And some people might find that comforting, but other people might not because they're so focused in their grief. So I feel like if you're going to encourage somebody and tell them that, oh, your OCD has made you a better person, I feel as though that's something that you should really know the person before doing So the fact that she's able to do that at her point in life, just to say, hey, look, my OCD has made me a better person, I feel like I really learned from that some people are that strong and are that confident in their abilities. Um, and another thing that I thought that I definitely learned from that is that some people do decline medication for that kind of thing. Um, I know for sure that not everybody takes medication for things that they might struggle with. Um, but I also thought that it was so interesting. The reason why she decided to do that was just because she felt as though she would lose a part of herself if she somehow disabled part of her OCD. Um, I thought that the whole topic was really interesting just because medication is definitely really important for a lot of people when it comes to things. And I'm very glad for her, particularly, that she was able to find better ways to cope with and manage her OCD symptoms. For some people, a combination of therapy, she talked about being able to go through cognitive behavioral therapy and medication is the best. Um, the only thing that I really took away from that was negative, really, was that I, some people that have a I'm so much better without medication viewpoint tend to make people who do require medication and can't function without it feel as though they are inferior for not being able to be better than medication. So I guess I learned that some people are really able to manage their symptoms without medication, even though their symptoms are very strong, like hers tended to be. So I think the video overall was really informative, and I did learn a lot about somebody's perspective on actually having OCD, because I've never heard anybody speak of or known anybody that actually has OCD to that degree that she does. Um, and the last bit is some biological, psychological, and social variables to pay attention to if I encounter a client with OCD. Um, Biologically, some people might have compulsions that cause them physical harm. And the case example in the book talked about somebody who washed her hands so often that her skin was having issues. So biologically, you need to pay attention to adverse effects of that obsession, that compulsion, that can cause them bodily harm. Psychologically, obsessive compulsive disorder causes people to obsess, like it says. And so a lot of that has to do with their thoughts leading to that action, and then they get anxious about it, and then they have to complete the action. So psychologically, the thought process really needs to be rewired or worked on in order for the person to be able to cope better. So I think it's important to know that that process and that cycle exists psychologically in a client, to better understand their condition. And socially, having these kinds of obsessive and compulsive disorders can influence their ability to hold a job, and just depending upon what the situation is. In the case example in the textbook, they talked about she had a contamination problem, and so she could not hold down a waitressing job because the idea of bussing tables just was not something that she could deal with. So I think it's important to know that socially, people with OCD can struggle just because they might not be able to maintain friendships, or their rituals might take up a lot of their time if it's a very severe case. So I think it's just important to know how they struggle and how that affects them socially.